Half of Europe lies in the ground, and out of all that silence comes a machine that copies a single idea until no king on earth can erase it. This is the story of how a plague invented the printing press.
Okay, new life, new me. Last time, I was a knight and a peasant erased me. So this time, I'm something cheap that can't be erased.
You're a scribe, Stan, a monk who copies books by hand, one letter at a time.
This is the cheap thing that can't be erased. My hand already hurts.
Your whole profession is about to be erased by a plague and then by a machine. Half the people in this story are dead by the end of this sentence.
Why is everyone always dead by the end of the sentence?
Because death, Stan, is extraordinarily productive. Watch what it builds. October 1347. 12 ships glide into Messina, in Sicily. The harbor waves. Almost no one on deck waves back. They're dead or dying, covered in black boils. The city orders the ships back out to sea. It is already too late.
Maybe, and hear me out. Don't unload the plague boat.
Over the next 5 years, it kills perhaps 40% of Europe. 20 million people. In Siena, a man named Agnello di Tura buried his 5 children with his own hands. Then he wrote it down so we would know.
Yeah, I've got nothing. That one's just real.
We blamed the rats for 600 years, but a 2018 study found the plague spread too fast for rats. The better fit was the fleas and lice living on us.
Great. The rats were innocent. The villain was medieval personal hygiene.
And the stories we tell are sometimes worse than the disease. They say the plague reached Europe when besieging Mongols catapulted their own plague dead over the walls of Caffa, the first biological weapon.
That's metal. Horrifying, but metal.
Except our only source was a notary writing 1,500 miles away, years later. Modern historians think the plague more likely arrived on grain ships. The famous war crime is, essentially, one guy's hot take.
So it's medieval clickbait. Why do I believe anything?
Hold on to that, because in 1349, the city of Strasbourg burned 2,000 of its own Jewish neighbors, accused of poisoning wells, over a plague that had not yet even reached the city. No facts, no science, a rumor, and a torch.
Remember that. Bad information kills people. That matters a lot. Later.
This is the worst thing that ever happened to us, and it is about to make us modern. Here is what the dying did for the living. With a third of the workforce in the ground, the survivors discovered something dangerous. They could say no. For the first time in centuries, a peasant's labor was scarce, and scarce means valuable.
Worst staffing crisis in history, solved entirely by everyone leaving, via the cemetery.
Wages climbed. So, in 1351, Edward III did the only thing a panicking ruler ever does. He made the raise illegal, froze wages by law, back to 1346.
Ah yes, the economy. Simply tell it no. Never failed once.
It failed. Commoners had money for the first time. So much that England passed a law about clothes. You were forbidden from dressing above your station, because lords could no longer tell a peasant from a gentleman by looking.
Nothing says we have lost control, like outlawing a nice tunic.
And in 1381, a priest named John Ball put the whole thing into 6 words. When Adam delved and Eve span, who was then the gentleman? When there were only 2 people on earth, which one was the Lord? The peasants' revolt nearly took London. It did not end well for John Ball. The boy King Richard promised the rebels everything, waited for them to go home, and then hanged him. But you cannot unsay 6 words.
The idea outlived the guy. Where have I heard that before? 6 words. Crashed feudalism's entire org chart. No slide deck required.
Now, be honest. West of the river Elbe, the plague loosened the chains. East of it, the very same plague let lords clamp them tighter. Same disease, opposite result. History has exactly one rule. There are no rules.
Cool. Love a system.
But follow the Western line. It takes 130 years, but the commoner wins the raise. Real wages peak around 1476, the highest they'll be until the 1880s. A whole class of people, flush, for the first time in living memory, goes looking for something to buy. And right on cue.
Let me guess. Some German with an ink problem opens a shop.
The plague didn't print a single page, Stan. It made the customers. But wanting books and making books were 2 different nightmares. Because for 1,000 years, a book meant skin. A single Bible on vellum took the hides of about 170 calves.
So the good book was, financially speaking, a barbecue.
Until paper. Pulped from old rags, paper cost roughly 1/10 of parchment. A damp mill town called Fabriano perfected it. Sizing, stamping mills, even the watermark. By 1389, paper was so important that Bologna carved its official sizes into stone. Paper got so important, so fast, that in 1389, the city of Bologna carved the 4 official paper sizes into a slab of stone. The first time in history, a sheet of paper had a legal standard.
They set paper sizes in stone. 6 centuries later, my printer still asks A4 or letter. We learned nothing. Bureaucrats standardizing paper sizes. 600 years before your printer jammed on A4 versus letter. Eternal war.
Now, the internet will tell you the plague gave us that cheap paper. All those dead, all those linen rags. It's a beautiful story.
I can feel a but coming. It's a big but.
It's backwards. A 2024 study of 800,000 books found the cities hit hardest by the plague printed fewer books, not more. The cheap rag paper is real. The plague's role in it is mostly a myth we like.
So, the inspiring version is upside down. Again, shocking. Never happens.
What's true is stranger. For 400 years, the knowledge of civilization was printed on its own underwear, pulped linen shirts and bed sheets collected by rag pickers. And that hunger for cheap paper never stopped. Centuries later, when the rags ran low, American mills bought old linen by the ton from Egypt, and the legend grew that some of it came wrapped around mummies.
We printed newspapers on pharaohs. That's the most metal recycling program ever. Books are recycled underwear. Honestly, the most dignified thing in this whole show.
And the readers kept multiplying. Around 1286, someone invented eyeglasses. A friar reverse-engineered them and gave the design away free. Suddenly, every scribe, every merchant could read for 20 more years. In Florence, 1/3 of the city was literate. They all wanted books. And the glasses come with a perfect little lie. For 300 years, Florence honored the tomb of Salvino degli Armati, the man who supposedly invented spectacles.
Let me guess. The tomb's fake.
The tomb, the inscription, and arguably Salvino himself, all forged. The city invented a hometown hero to win a bragging contest, and the lie outlived everyone in it.
A fake grave for a fake inventor. That's commitment.
The real maker hoarded the secret, but a Pisan friar named Alessandro della Spina cracked it and gave the design away, the Chronicle says, with a cheerful and willing heart.
History's first open source release. Patch notes. Now everyone can see. Faster than one monk with a quill could ever copy them.
Demand, with nowhere to go, a whole continent of readers, and a supply chain of one tired man at a desk.
Hi, yes, I have been screaming.
And hand copying didn't just take forever. It drifted. Every copy of a copy gained errors, one scribe's slip becoming the next man's gospel. The poet Petrarch complained his hired scribes were lazy and full of mistakes.
So the old system was slow and buggy. 2 stars. Would not hand copy again.
Here's where it gets real. For 10,000 years, to make a second copy of anything, a human being had to make it again, by hand. And then, in one workshop, in one lifetime, that stops being true. One idea, infinite copies. The world is about to rearrange itself around the page that copies itself. His name was Johannes Gutenberg, and he was a goldsmith, a metal man, not a bookman, and his real genius was not the letter. China had movable type 400 years earlier. His genius was a system, a steel punch that stamps a mold, a hand mold that casts 100 identical letters an hour, an oil-based ink he borrowed from oil painters, and a press he borrowed from people who crush grapes.
A wine press, a metal alphabet, and stolen art supplies. Western civilization, assemble.
And let's be honest, because this show is honest. Gutenberg was not first. A Chinese commoner named Bi Sheng cut movable type from clay around 1040. Korea cast it in bronze by 1234. The oldest movable metal type book that still exists, the Jikji, was printed in Korea in 1377, 78 years before Gutenberg. It sits, right now, in a library in Paris. And we only know the real first inventor by an accident. His name was Bi Sheng, a Chinese commoner with no rank who cut movable type from baked clay around 1040.
400 years early. So why isn't he on the money?
Because he left no other trace. Everything we know survives in one paragraph of one man's notebook of odds and ends, Shen Kuo's Dream Pool Essays, the most important footnote in history.
One guy's notes app saved the origin of printing. Back up your devices, people.
And the oldest one that still exists, the Jikji, Korea, 1377, ended up in a library in Paris, which owned it for 20 years without realizing what it was.
The proof that Gutenberg wasn't first was just misshelved?
Until 1972, when a Korean scholar named Park Byung-seon pulled it off the shelf and recognized it. The proof was in the building the whole time. Nobody read the colophon.
Ironic for a book about reading. So, Europe threw Gutenberg first, a 500-year party, while the actual original was in a French basement.
It did. So why did the press explode in Europe and not in China? Not genius. Geometry. A 26-letter alphabet you can hold in a shoebox versus tens of thousands of characters you cannot. Gutenberg's luck was the language.
The killer feature was spelling. Incredible.
And here is the joke that runs the rest of history. To pay for it all, Gutenberg's first bestseller wasn't the Bible. It was indulgences, slips of paper the church sold to shorten your time in purgatory. The church's own fundraising bankrolled the machine. Just how good a business was it? One printer ran off 190,000 indulgences in a single job. The church had built a money printer, literally.
And then handed the blueprints to the guy writing the angry letter.
Even the reviews were glowing. A papal legate, the future Pope Pius II, saw the Bible's pages at a fair and marveled the script was so clean you could read it without spectacles.
5 stars. The Pope's office reviewed the weapon that would be used against the Pope's office. The church invented print-on-demand salvation. Bold, real long game on the self-sabotage.
He printed about 180 Bibles. 49 survive. A future pope saw the pages and gave them 5 stars. So clean you could read them without spectacles. Gutenberg had built the most important machine in 1,000 years.
Okay, finally, a guy in this show who wins.
His fancier sued him. Johannes fussed, called in the loans, took the press, took the Bibles, and printed his own name on them. Gutenberg's name appears on none of his own work. He died poor and uncredited. And the financier who erased Gutenberg earned a strange kind of curse. They say Johannes fussed, took the printed Bibles to Paris and sold them, but they were too identical, too perfect to be made by human hands.
Uh-oh, medieval people meeting copy-paste.
Paris reached the only logical conclusion: witchcraft. The red ink, they whispered, was blood. Some say that is where the legend of the man who sold his soul, Dr. Faustus, was born.
Buddy invented Control-C and got tried for sorcery. We have always feared the copy. He invented the credits and then got cut from them. Of course he did.
For the first time in history, a thought could outlive the hand that wrote it. And then the flood. In the 50 years after Gutenberg, Europe, which had hand-copied books 1 page at a time for 1,000 years, printed 20 million of them.
From one guy with a quill and a deadline to 20 million units. That's not a hobby. That's a flood.
And the machine turned on the hand that built it. The church had used print to sell indulgences. Now a monk named Martin Luther used the same machine to attack them. There was a salesman, Tetzel, with a jingle: as soon as the coin in the coffer rings, the soul from purgatory springs.
Catchy. Also, footnote says he maybe never said it. History's first viral quote. And it might be fake. Feels right.
In 1517, Luther sent out 95 complaints for a polite academic debate. The printers had other plans. Across Germany in 2 weeks, across Europe in 2 months. He wrote to the Pope, "It is a mystery to me how my theses were spread to so many places. He didn't mean to start a revolution. The press started it for him."
He wanted a faculty seminar and accidentally got a continent-wide schism. And the famous nailing it to the door might be fan fiction.
Luther became the first best-selling author in history. He called printing God's highest act of grace, and it made him a superstar.
Other monks got sainthood. Luther got a backlist.
In the decade after 1517, Luther's pamphlets and his rivals' answers flooded the German-speaking world. By some counts, his works alone were 1/3 of everything printed. The argument didn't spread, it saturated.
He didn't win the debate. He buried it in paper.
Now, the honest asterisk. Historians still fight about this. One side, Eisenstein, says the press made knowledge fixed, permanent, identical. The other, John's, says early print was a swamp of piracy and typos, and permanence had to be built by people, slowly.
So, you can't unprint an idea? Turns out you could absolutely misprint it, steal it, and resell it. The permanence was a group project.
But the direction was one way. They burned William Tyndale for printing an English Bible. They burned the man. Watch what happens to the book.
Oh, here we go again. I get erased. Fine. This is my whole thing. Wait, there's more of me?
They tried to erase you, Stan, but you're not expensive anymore. You're cheap, and cheap things copy.
I can't be erased. I'm everywhere. Oh no, there's 100 of me. Am I even special?
You're immortal. That's the trade. The expensive knight was unique, and they erased him in one shot. The cheap idea is everywhere, and nobody can erase it, because nobody can erase it.
So last episode, being rare, got me killed. And this episode, being common, makes me immortal and miserable.
Now you understand the press, and the internet, and every argument you've ever lost, online. Probably exaggerated, but the pattern is real. The cheap, copyable thing always finds more to copy. Print became newspapers. Newspapers became the wire became the screen in your hand.
Black death to broadband. There's 1,000 of me now, and we never shut up. Even the bird gave up. There's too many of me to land on.
A plague made labor scarce. Scarcity made commoners rich. Rich commoners wanted books. Cheap paper made books possible, and one stubborn goldsmith made them endless. Black death to broadband. The whole modern world is just that, one cheap sheet of paper, still copying itself, and nobody, in 500 years, has figured out how to unprint an idea.
Okay, so I finally did it. I'm the cheap thing that can't be erased. I'm an idea.
You're an idea, Stan. Congratulations. Now there are 1,000 of you, and none of you can sleep.
What is that? And why do I suddenly feel like I could reorganize my entire life?
Next time, a bitter bean from a faraway hill arrives in Europe, and the continent that ran on beer and wine suddenly wakes up. Out of the coffee house comes the newspaper, the stock exchange, the insurance market, and a dangerous new habit, thinking for yourself.
A bean builds the modern mind?
Subscribe, and I'll show you the drink that started revolutions.
That's a better deal than the printing press. Could you not auto-complete me? I had a flow going.
Stan, you're dead in this one.
Dead guys can't wave. That's ableist. My whole cheek is gone. Who scheduled the cow? I have no ears. I have never had ears. Why does wardrobe keep forgetting?
The oldest surviving movable-metal-type book, the Jikji. Am I saying that right? Is there a Korean consultant? I refuse to be the guy who...
Say it with your chest, Graham. This is the wrong layer. This is SO, the wrong layer. No, that's the last one. I'm the book guy now. I got promoted from horse guy to book guy. He didn't even get to finish hello.
Next time, for 1,000 years, Europe drank beer for breakfast and was mildly drunk from dawn to dusk. Then a bean arrived that did the opposite, and an entire civilization sobered up.
And that's good? That sounds like it ends in paperwork.
Out of the coffee house came the newspaper, the stock market, the insurance company, the scientific society, and the radical idea that an ordinary person could think for himself.
A coffee shop built the modern world?
Episode 3: The Bean That Woke Up Europe. Subscribe. The revolution will be caffeinated.
That's still a better deal than the printing press.